the land come out. Ajab al-kuffar, the growth, it's pleasing to the farmers, pleasing to those people who are indulged in it. ثُمَّ يَهِيجُ, and then it dries up. ثُمَّ يَكُونُ مُصْفَرًّا, it becomes yellow, and then it dries up, and then it's blown away. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this is like the life of the dunya. وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, but it just doesn't end as the crops die, that in the hereafter, that there is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there is severe punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and forgiveness from Allah, wa ridwan, and approval from Allah. وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ, and this life of the dunya is nothing but the enjoyment of delusion. A notable scholar says, or explains this story of how he met with a Muslim police officer in a Muslim country, and he says that the police officer came, there was at the scene of a car accident, and he came to the accident. He found one of the young men that was involved in the accident. They had laid him down on the floor, laid him down on the highway, and blocked off the other traffic. And he realized there was no time for the ambulance to come, that this boy was in his final moments, and he was going to die. And so the officer took it upon himself to kneel nearby the boy's ear and say to him, قُلْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, say لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ as your final words. And that boy, he raised his hands up very high, and he raised his fingers, and he said, أَشْهَدُ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا عَبْدُهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. And he put his hand down, and then he passed away. And indeed, actually, during the car accident that I was in, so many times we've talked about how we think that this will be our last words, and we'll have control over what we say. But I remember being in that hospital, and the officer speaking to me, I didn't have control of what I was saying. I could only barely pick up what he was saying, and only things that come from your heart, you say it at that moment, and you don't know what you're saying. And so this officer, after the boy had passed away, he had gone back to his parents to tell him of the good news that even though their son had passed away, he had died with La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And then telling his parents, the parents said, وَنَحْنُ نُبَشِّرُكَ, and we tell you the good news that he only did tawbah 2 weeks ago. And he only started going to the masjid 2 weeks ago, and he only started becoming a Muslim 2 weeks ago. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to take his life on this La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Abu al-Atahiyah, he has some other verses of poetry in which he says, يا عجبا للناس لو فكروا وحاسبوا أنفسهم أبصروا وعبروا الدنيا إلى غيرها فإنما الدنيا لهم معبر لا فخر إلا فخر أهل التقى غدا إذا ضمهم المحشر ليعلمن الناس أن التقى والبر خير ما يدخر عجبت للإنسان في فخره وهو غدا في قبره يقبر ما بال من أوله نطفة وجيفة آخره يفخر أصبح لا يملك تقديم ما يرجو ولا تأخير ما يحذر وأصبح الأمر إلى غيره في كل ما يقضى وما يقدر. Dear brothers and sisters, in conclusion, if it was, or we can imagine right now that we are all dead and that we've all passed away, and that we've all seen the hellfire, and we've all seen the reality of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us. And that we may be doomed at that moment, and then we say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "O Allah, send us back," perhaps we would do good. Imagine that you are in this position, and imagine today as you walk outside of the masjid, or maybe even here right now, that you were given this chance to actually come back to the dunya. Forget what you did in the past, but now you're giving the chance to come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he once stood at the grave, and with him was a companion. And he looked at the person at the graveyard, and he said to his companion, he said, if this person was given the chance to come back to the dunya, مَا تَرَاهُ صَانِعًا, what do you think he would do? And his companion said to him that he said he would do nothing except those deeds that would win him the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu said to him, إِن لَمْ يَكُنْ هُوَ فَكُنْ أَنْتَ. He said, if it's not going to be this dead person, then let it be you. And we pass on this advice to myself and to all of us here, إِن لَمْ يَكُنْ هُوَ فَلْيَكُنْ نَحْنُ. That if it's not going to be that dead person, then let it be us who gets the chance to come back to the dunya, to come back to Allah.